All right, let's just jump right into this, because this is a wild one. You've got a universe filled with these corporate-sponsored, morally empty superheroes, and then, into that world, we drop an ancient, silent warrior whose entire life is about one thing: destroying evil. So what happens when that kind of unstoppable force meets a system that's completely, utterly corruptible? Well, it all kicks off with Vought International and their, super marketable motto: tomorrow's heroes, today's science. It sounds pretty inspiring, right? But we all know that behind that slick slogan is just a swamp of NDAs, unmarked graves, and enough ethical violations to fill an ocean.
And yeah, that science is about to backfire in the most spectacular way you can imagine. See, Vought, in its infinite arrogance, wasn't happy with just creating heroes. No, they wanted to make gods who could teleport, who could open portals. But what happens when you start knocking on doors you are not at all prepared to open?
What happens is a dimensional breach. We're talking deep in a sublevel of Vought Tower. An experiment that was supposed to create a tiny 6-inch opening instead rips a 15-foot-wide hole into somewhere else. The temperature spikes, the blast doors literally melt, and 37 scientists are just instantly turned into carbon shadows on the walls.
Now, what steps through that gateway is what's really interesting. It's not a demon, no. It's the thing that demons have nightmares about. A figure in armor, the color of old bronze and dried blood, just walks through the hellfire like a man walking home from work. And then, he vanishes into the concrete canyons of New York City.
For the first time in who even knows how long, the Doomslayer breathes air that doesn't reek of sulfur. But he can still smell evil. It's just different here. It's not demonic. It's human. It's the kind of corruption that wears expensive suits, smiles for the cameras, and is protected by a massive corporate machine.
Look, the Slayer doesn't get the rules of this world, but what he does have is basically a PhD in violence and victims, and he's about to get a front-row seat to what this place calls heroism.
He just sees this blue and silver blur moving at almost 900 miles per hour. That blur is a train, completely high on Compound V, and he runs straight through a pedestrian named Erica Chen. The impact just atomizes her. There's nothing left but a red mist hanging in the air. For A-Train, it's an inconvenience. For the Slayer, it's a judgment.
The Slayer is basically an engine of consequence. He starts to track A-Train, but he gets diverted when he finds another one of these so-called heroes, the Deep, using his fame to assault a woman in an alley. The Slayer doesn't negotiate, he doesn't give a warning, he just intervenes. And when Starlight finally shows up, she's faced with a level of violence this whole system is designed to cover up, not prevent.
And this moment perfectly shows the culture clash here. Starlight, who, still kind of believes in the system, she pleads with him, "You can't just execute him, there are consequences." She's talking about lawyers and PR spin and stock prices. The Slayer, he's thinking about a very different kind of consequence. His answer is silent, simple, and absolutely final. He grabs the Deep by the head and, with just a quiet snap, breaks his neck. He drops the corpse like a piece of trash. Oh yes, he can, and he absolutely will, execute him. Justice in this brand new world has a brand new face.
So, killing a member of the Seven? That's like poking a god with a very sharp stick. And that god's name is Homelander. And he isn't grieving, he's annoyed. Something is killing his assets in his city, and he needs to put it in its place.
So let's look at the tail of the tape here. In this corner, you've got Homelander, a lab-grown god, a corporate asset worshipped by millions who has never, ever faced a real challenge. And in the other corner, you have the Slayer, a primordial force of nature feared by hell itself, for whom struggle is the only thing he's ever known.
Homelander confronts the Slayer with that classic swagger, just that absolute belief in his own superiority. But when the Slayer grabs his wrist and actually resists his strength, Homelander's whole worldview doesn't just crack, it shatters. And his response? A promise of total annihilation.
The Slayer lands a punch that sends Homelander stumbling back, and for the first time since he was a lab experiment, America's greatest hero tastes his own blood. The physical shock is nothing compared to the psychological damage. Because in his world, gods, they just don't bleed.
So Homelander unleashes his most powerful weapon, his heat vision. The beams, which are hot enough to melt tank armor, just deflect off the Slayer's armor. As the Slayer walks right through the inferno, completely unharmed, Homelander's rage just melts away into pure, raw terror. that question? It's not a taunt, it's a genuine plea for him to understand what's happening.
The fight ends with Homelander broken, bleeding, and totally humiliated. But for the Slayer, this victory leads to a huge realization. Homelander is powerful? Yeah, but he isn't the real disease. He's just the most obvious symptom.
And that is when Billy Butcher steps out of the shadows. He sees the Slayer as the ultimate weapon, a tactical nuke he can just point at Vought. He offers an alliance, showing the Slayer a roadmap to Vought's entire rotten system. He's offering intel, resources, and a kill list with Homelander sitting right at the top. The Slayer's response is simple. He takes the burner phone Butcher offers him, and he just crushes it into dust. He fought alone through health for eons. He doesn't need allies, especially not one whose crusade smells so much like personal revenge.
Because the Slayer has identified the true enemy. It's not the individual Supes, it's Vought. It's the corporate machine that manufactures these monsters, covers up their crimes, and then sells them to the public as heroes. You don't just kill the demons, you have to destroy the hell that spawns them.
And so, the Slayer's war evolves. This isn't just about punching things anymore. To kill a corporation, you can't just punch it. He's shifting from brute force to information warfare.
His first attempt to get Vought's data leads him to a choice that hell never forced on him. He raids a server facility, right? But the fight starts a fire that traps 214 civilians in the apartments above. He's holding the data drives, his mission objective, and he can hear the screams of innocent people. So what does he do? He drops the drives. He saves the people.
That failure forces him to learn a really valuable lesson. Being righteous doesn't mean there won't be collateral damage. He realizes that to tear down a world built on lies, the most powerful weapon isn't his fist, it's the truth. So he plans a second raid, but this time it's not just to steal the data, it's to weaponize it. And he succeeds. He breaches Vought's primary backup servers and just unleashes 847 terabytes of pure evil onto the entire internet. Every crime, every cover-up, every single victim. He doesn't just punch a hole in Vought's story, he obliterates it with an extinction-level event made of data.
The data leak is a mortal wound to Vought. The system starts to collapse under the weight of its own evil. But the Slayer's hunt, it doesn't end. There are always more demons. Which leaves us with one final, lingering question. His methods are brutal, the collateral damage is real, and his war is eternal. So, to fight an enemy this deep-seated, do you have to become a monster yourself to win?